Okay, so this is fourth in our series of Romeo and Juliet revision videos for your Shakespeare assessment in Year 11. This scene is Act 1, Scene 2, and it shows Lord Capulet's feelings for Juliet early on in the play, which differ quite greatly from his feelings about Juliet later in the play in Act 3, Scene 5. In this scene, Lord Capulet is talking to Paris, and he's the man, if you remember, that wants to marry Juliet. Excuse me. Now, in this scene, Paris is sort of being quite pushy about wanting to marry Juliet, and Capulet sort of wants him to marry Juliet as a business arrangement, but he's also aware that his daughter is very young. Now, at the beginning of the scene, he says, Montague is bound as well as I in penalty alike, and 'tis not hard, I think, so men for old as we to keep the peace. Now, this refers to the feud between the two families, and if you remember at the beginning of the play, Prince Aeschylus gives them all a row, and he says, if you disturb our streets again with all your fighting between the families, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. So Capulet is quite worried about stability in his family at this point. He wants things to be calm and stable. He doesn't want to rock the boat. And it also makes you think a little bit about his relationship with Lord Montague and also the relationship between Romeo and Juliet. But I am waffling. Let's get on to the point. So Paris, as you can see, I'm going to zoom in on Paris's speech here. My lord, what say you to my suit? Now, he's not asking him what he thinks of his jacket. He's asking him, what say you to my suit, as in my courtship of Juliet and the fact that I want to marry her. So in other words, he's asking Juliet's dad, can I marry Juliet? Capulet's very reluctant at this point. And he says, and I've highlighted it in green, my child is yet a stranger in the world. In other words, she's very young in the world. She hath not seen the change of 14 years. She's only 14. She hasn't come out of her 14th year yet. Let 2 more summers wither in their pride, ere we may think her ripe to be a bride. The word ere means before. So he says, let's have 2 more summers before she is ready to be a bride. So he thinks she ought to be 16 before she marries Paris. However, look at this word ripe. It's rather odd, isn't it? A fruit becomes ripe when it's ready to burst with its seeds. And in using that word ripe, it sort of implies that she's going to get married and then get pregnant straight away and have babies, which of course is what they did in those days. Sorry, my hands are a bit wobbly today, aren't they? I promise I haven't been drinking. So he's a bit concerned that she's too young, and he says she ought to wait till she's 16. So we think here that he's a caring father, except for that word ripe, which is a little bit odd. Paris argues, younger than she, a happy mother's maid. In other words, there are girls far younger than her already married and having babies, which is unbelievable. And Capulet seems to be really sensible here. He says, too soon marred. Now the word marred means spoiled. And he says those girls who get married so young, so early, become spoiled because they're not ready. They're not ready to get married. They're not ready to have sex. They're not ready to have babies. It's just too young. So he seems to be a caring parent here. And then the next couple of lines, you sort of feel sorry for him as well, because he says, sorry, let me just get my, my camera focused. Mr. Rees does far better videos than me. Mine are very amateurish. The earth hath swallowed all my hopes, but she is the hopeful lady of my earth. Now, what this is telling you is that the earth has swallowed all my hopes. All his other children have gone into the ground. In other words, he had other children, but they're dead. Juliet is the only child he's got left. So this is another reason why he might not want her to marry Paris, that he's feeling almost a bit selfish, that he wants to keep her to himself. However, he does say, woo her gentle Paris, get her heart, my will to her consent is but a part. He says in this scene, she has to give her consent. It's up to her if she wants to marry you or not. Now, this contrasts completely with what happens in Act 3, Scene 5, which we'll look at in a minute. So he says, woo her if you want to, court her, chat her up, whatever you want to do, but it's up to her. And she agree within her scope of choice. If she agrees, and here means if she agrees, within her scope of choice lies my consent and fair according voice. So if she agrees, then that's okay. I will agree, he says. But that isn't what he says 2 acts later in the play. He also then says to Paris, look, this night I hold an old accustomed feast. In other words, we're having a big party. An old accustomed means it's probably a regular thing. Maybe once a year he has this big party. And then if you skip down to the bottom of the scene, among fresh female buds shall you this night inherit at my house. Hear all see, and like her most, whose merit most shall be. In other words, come to my party tonight, and you'll see lots of really nice women. And you can have a choice. You don't just have to go with Juliet. You might find someone better at my party. Now, all of this would indicate that he is concerned about Juliet. He doesn't want her to get married too young. He wants to keep her to himself. He wants to keep her at home. She's his only child, etc., etc. However, this contrasts greatly with Act 3, Scene 5, which we will look at next.